You are at Lake Rant, where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one's for Tony Jabroni, who says, rant about Demolition D's Kill La Kill review. Now, I'm sure I've mentioned in the past that I am not a fan of this video. I just rewatched it just to, to fully refresh myself on it. And I mean, one of the biggest criticisms I really have of this video is that it is dated. This came out in early 2014, pretty much right after Kill La Kill aired. And, I mean, probably the biggest, thing that coming back to it would make people groan is, the excessive use of the budget meme, constantly insisting that, the budget was fluctuating scene to scene. Oh, I spent more money on this scene and less money on this scene. And, I ended up deconstructing that in a video called Stop Blaming Budget for Animation Quality, a rant I did way back. That idea has sort of permeated out. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm the first person to mention it. I was on YouTube, maybe. But, it is now something that people will adamantly, attack people for saying, essentially. So, stuff like that, I think, is just a product of the tenor of anime discussion at the time. But also just the fact that it even is such a sort of standard review. And it really speaks to a lot of my problems with reviews, which is this sort of coming into a show with your expectations of what you think this show is going to be, what you hope for it to be, and then judging the show based on how well it lives up to your expectations, as opposed to trying to figure out what the show is trying to do and judging it on how well it does what it's trying to do. And in fairness, I think in the case of Kill La Kill, what the show is trying to do is fairly difficult to determine, especially as a Western audience, just because of the fact that so much of the theming is based around Sengoku era politics and shit, and the conquest of Oda Nobunaga. It has so many themes tied around Japanese mythology and shit that even I did not understand a lot of the first time I watched the show. I mean, if you were to go listen to the podcast that Best Guy Ever and I did, after first watching the show in 2014, we were very confused about what its overall message was, because we had thought it was more of a commentary on Randian objectivism, and then it sort of seemed to stop being that. But once I did find out about the themes, largely through a panel by Charles Dunbar at Otakon one year, I came to appreciate the show vastly more, and watching it again, just basically understanding what it was actually trying to say caused me to, really change my perspective on the show. So this is another way in which I say, this review is dated. It makes sense as, a first reaction to this show being over if you don't really get it, and you're kind of okay, that seemed like it was just a bunch of fun nonsense. Some moments really worked for me, some moments didn't. But, so much of my perspective on, what even the show was trying to do at all had changed once I understood it better. That it made episodes I didn't care for suddenly make sense, or made, moments that seem like they don't work from a narrative progression standpoint, but they do work from a thematic progression standpoint. So it's a complicated and messy show, no doubt. And I'm not going to say every moment of it is absolutely amazing, but so much of it is so amazing that, I really love it. But my biggest problem with Demo's video here is, aside from the fact that he keeps blaming the budget on it, is just him sort of slagging off what I see as incredibly inventive animation. Of course, I already have a video about this that has 1 million fucking views called Kill La Kill's Inventive Animation, where I break down all the reasons that I think the show looks great, and that I think it's just so exciting to watch second by second, that it's not about how fluid the animation is, it's about how creative the animation is. And also, talking about the themes of the show, I have the video Gurren Lagann vs. Kill La Kill, a thematic rundown, where I talk about all the themes in both shows and break them down in a lot of depth. So, if you want to know more about Kill La Kill's themes, go watch that video. I also have another video about the animation in the show, the explosive payoffs in Kill La Kill's opening scene. And I also have a video called Kill La Kill is What My Mind Looks Like, which is more of a general review. So, my opinions on Kill La Kill are well spoken for. So, you can see, if you just want to know why I disagree with his statements, just go watch my other videos on it. But, I do think that a lot of his criticisms they're not unfair. I mean, again, I felt some of the same ways when I was watching the show. It's just that this type of review, um, I guess it's sort of speaking to people who are planning to watch the show the same way. Like if you're saying like, here's what I got out of it watching through it once, you know, that's probably what you're also going to experience. So, you know, here's what I experienced. You can take that and use it as a judgment of whether or not you want to watch the show. I think that's fine. It's just not that interesting because it's kind of like, it almost makes me feel like it wasn't worth him talking about it, you know, in a way. If he didn't have an interesting angle of approach, there's not like a really good reason to talk about Kill La Kill other than it's a show that just ended and he, you know, had been following it, had been hyped for it, had feelings about it. I guess that's, you know, a perfectly fine reason to make a video, but I'm generally not a huge fan of Demo's anime reviews anyways. I really love his, like, should you watch videos, his seasonal videos, you know, the more comedy, more editing-centric stuff. Just because, again, I think a lot of his reviews don't go that deep into the work. He's not really asking himself, what is this show trying to say and how is it going about saying it and does it succeed or fail? He's asking himself, like, is this show good or bad based on these standards that he has in mind of what he thinks the show should be? And, like, a lot of stuff that he criticizes is just flat out stuff that I don't think is a problem. One critique that is actually confusing over the course of the video is that early on he keeps sort of suggesting that the show is a parody, and I don't know what he means by that, because, like, there are elements of parody to the show for sure, but it's never at any point a parody, like just a parody. It is using tropes and remixing them and combining them, and it certainly has something to say about lots of anime tropes, but, you know, to call it a parody, it's what is it a parody of? What does it do to parody other shows? I would have liked some explanation of that, especially when later on in the video he continually criticizes the fact that the show will do some crazy, you know, some crazy thing will happen and then they'll go into like a scientific explanation. That is the parody. Like, that's the joke. That stuff is hilarious. I don't understand how he didn't find it funny, but maybe it's like, I mean, watching this review, I couldn't help but think, like, maybe this show was too autistic for Demolition D, and it was just autistic enough for me, you know, because, like, so much of what makes the show good is metatextual, so much of it is, you really have to break down in a lot of depth to really get it. A lot of it, like, if you're viewing it as a straightforward narrative experience, it is definitely not as interesting of a show as if you're viewing it as a metatextual work. And again, you can watch my other videos where I go into the themes. So, you know, I'm not saying this is a bad video, but for me, it does nothing for me as a review of Kill La Kill. It has almost nothing to do with what the show means to me or how I would see it or interpret it. None of the criticisms that he brings to the table ring true to me. You know, like, I talked about Goat Jesus' Kimi no Nawa video, and, like, even though I disagree with him about that movie, I still thought his criticisms were interesting, and, you know, I could understand why those things would bother somebody. In Demo's case, a lot of the criticisms I felt like, I just feel like you missed the point, you know? But the point was unclear. So, that's fair, I guess.